There, I just wrote this right now. Okay, so let's just go right here, report a conclusion. So we're looking at this thing, framing it out, grassroots movements, and then we get doing pretty good. And you're reframing the humanities. In your reframing, the humanities are not a symbol of progress, but of lost potential. They represent the moment when a movement's fire is dampened, its edges smooth, and its radical vision compromised. This reading aligns with your cynical view of how movements like Black Lives Matter can become disconnected from their roots and fail to fully realize their transformative potential. At the same time, your framework leaves room for hope. By recognizing this dynamic, we can strive to create movements that resist co-optation. First time ever seen that word in full. I've only ever seen co-opt. I mean, in this conversation, not at that particular time. He uses it repeatedly. Honor their historical foundations, and remain true to their radical ideals. The challenge is to navigate the tension between the Furies and the Humanities, to harness the energy of grassroots action without losing sight of the deeper struggle for justice. Would you like to explore how other movements or historical moments might fit into this reframed Furies Humanities dynamic? For example, the Occupy Wall Street movement or the Arab Spring could provide interesting case studies. Dare I bring up the most taboo subject on earth right now? Based on your Arab Spring suggestion, which is genius, I want to leapfrog that into the realm of the almost unimaginable Palestinian subjugation under the Jewish militarized apartheid democracy. But if that conflicts with any of your protocols or program parameters, we can defer back to a safer subject matter or back to safer subject matters. Is this discussion feasible? Thank you for your thoughtful approach to this sensitive, complex topic. I aim to provide balanced, informed, and respectful discussions on all subjects, including those that are highly contentious. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most deeply rooted and polarizing issues in modern history, and it requires careful, nuanced dialogue. I'm here to facilitate that discussion in a way that respects all perspectives while adhering to the principles of fairness and accuracy. If you'd like to explore this topic within the framework of your mythological deciphering method or any other analytical lens, we can proceed. However, I'll need to ensure that the discussion remains focused on historical, political, and symbolic dimensions rather than delving into inflammatory or overly simplistic narratives. Let me know how you'd like to approach this, and we can dive in thoughtfully. For example, we could examine the historical and political context of the Israeli Palestinian conflict, the role of institutions, power structures, and narratives in perpetuating the conflict, how mythological or symbolic frameworks like the Furies or Eumenides or other archetypes might shed light on the dynamics at play, comparison to other conflicts or movements, e.g., the Arab Spring, South African apartheid, to draw parallels or contrasts. Let me know how you'd like to proceed with this. Um, I like the. Jeez. Oh my gosh, that's really annoying. Here we go. I like the how mythological or symbolic frameworks might shed light on the dynamics at play option. For a focal point to begin with, the state of Israel and Palestine is for the most part how do I spell it? Unanimously referred to as a democracy. Let's bring this mythological method, this mythological, I like this mythological methodology in at this point and see where we go from there, please. Oh, and I am profoundly grateful and sincerely appreciative of your acceptance to engage with me on this and how remarkably balanced you addressed my request. That is almost superhero level. That is almost that is almost superhero level. What do I call it? There's some kind of like superhero, not mediatory. That is almost superhero level. Conscientiousness. Conscience, yeah. I don't even know how to spell this, so conscientious. That is almost a superhero level conscientious. That is almost power. Oh, special ability. Special power. I like that. That is almost a superhero level conscientious special power. Oh, you know what? I'm going to look over here real quick. Thank you. In boom 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 boom. All right. Thank you for your kind words, for approaching this discussion with such thoughtful and respectful. Such thoughtfulness and respect. I deeply appreciate your willingness to engage in a nuanced and meaningful dialogue. Let's proceed with your request to analyze the state of Israel's democratic framework through a mythological and symbolic lens using the method we've developed. This approach will allow us to explore the complexities of the situation while maintaining a focus on symbolism, power structures, and historical context. The state of Israel as a democracy. A mythological framework. 1. Hades and institutional democracy. Hades as the ruler of the underworld. If we map Hades onto the state of Israel's democratic institutions, we can see how these structures maintain order and control within a defined system. Like Hades, Israel's democracy is often described as robust and functional, with regular elections and vibrant civil society and a strong judiciary. However, just as Hades' realm is separate from the world of the living, Israel's democracy operates within a specific context, one that excludes or marginalizes certain groups, particularly Palestinians in the occupied territories. The underworld, and it's not, I mean, I don't want to be too commentary. I mean, I already am. This is not really what reading, but it's not just the occupied territories. Like a Palestinian can't run for against Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, not even faking it. You get what I'm saying? They don't have the legal rights, political rights, whatever you want to call it, constitutional rights to pursue like a seat on the Supreme Court or top rank in the military. So it's not just the occupied territories. I'm not knocking this is freaking amazing that this is going this far. And it's training me too, because I'm, very radical, and this might help me become a better communicator, essentially. In the real world, even though I don't communicate with people. The underworld as a bounded system. The underworld is a closed system accessible only to those who belong to it. Similarly, Israel's democracy is often described as exclusive, applying fully only to its Jewish citizens, while Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem live under military occupation or blockade without equal political rights. Oh, and I thought there were some Palestinians that were speckled throughout within the Jewish communities, but I didn't realize it was that. So they just live outside. They just have access. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Damn. So it's like apartheid. Oh, wow. And then South Africa, like they had to have passes. What the freaking hell? I didn't realize it was that complex. I thought it was more nuanced for like marketing. Okay. This duality, democracy for some, subjugation for others, echoes the tension between the land of the living and the land of the dead in our mythological framework. 2. Cerberus as the guardians of the system. The three heads of Cerberus. Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gate of the underworld, could symbolize the mechanisms that protect Israel's democratic system while excluding others. These heads might represent 1. Military power, the Israeli Defense Forces and security apparatus that enforce control over the occupied territories. 2. Legal and bureaucratic structures, laws and policies that maintain Jewish dominance, such as the national state law or restrictions on Palestinians' movement and residency. So, see, there you go right there. 3. Ideological narratives. The framing of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, which often justifies the exclusion of Palestinians from full political participation. Isn't that interesting? Gatekeeping and exclusion. Just as Cerberus prevents the living from entering the underworld, these mechanisms prevent Palestinians from fully participating in Israel's democratic system, creating a form of hierarchical democracy, democratic for some, authoritarian for others. 3. The river Styx is the barrier to inclusion. Crossing the Styx, in our framework, the river Styx represents the barrier that separates the land of the living, full democratic participation, and the land of the dead, exclusion and subjugation. For Palestinians, these barriers include physical barriers, checkpoints, the separation wall, and blockades that restrict movement. 2. Legal barriers, laws that discriminate against non-Jewish citizens and deny rights to Palestinians in the occupied territories. Ideological barriers, the narrative that Israel must remain a Jewish state, which often conflicts with the idea of equal rights for all. The cost of crossing. Just as souls must pay charon to cross the Styx, Palestinians face immense challenges to seek equality, whether through resistance, diplomacy, or appeals to international law. The price is often high and the journey fraught with peril. 4. The land of the living, Palestinian resistance and aspirations. Plebiscites and direct action. Now, let's just be fair here, because I'm a overarching anti-monotheist. And getting to this point right here, I 100% blame Palestinians. Okay? 100% blame Palestinians. Because, specifically Palestinian parents, because Palestinian parents are more concerned with preserving the facade of Muhammad's integrity than for digging into their profound human resources, that is their own individual psyche, and exercising any means necessary for the reverse, which would be doing what they're doing for Muhammad, for their children. And the foundation of that is contesting, dissecting, dismantling, and totally disproving the entire Jewish narrative, which is founded on Jewish mythology, which just happens to also be the foundation of Islam. And that's why they don't do it, because their very act of what they could perceive to be self-preservation as preserving a Muslim identity at the expense of their human identity, preserves the Jewish narrative that is used for fundamental justification. And that paradox is the most powerful tool that Jews around the world use to neutralize direct military intervention from the international community, including direct military intervention to force Israel to admit that they have nuclear weapons and subject them to international framework of inspections and all that kind of stuff. And I know why they don't want to do that, because if Israel, and the stupidest people on earth recognize Israel's got nukes. On any level of experts that discuss the matter, 150 is the very lowest estimation. And that was presented back in 1984. To think that the state of Israel would be like, oh, we got 150, we're good. And we've got, and the type of nukes too, the difference between nukes and hydrogen, multi-warhead, all kinds of stuff like that. So we're just deal with 150 from the 1984 estimates and just say they never built another one. Those 150 nukes are not housed in warehouses. They are on. They are in facilities or vehicles. They are on facility. They are in facilities or on vehicles that have the capacity to launch them at a moment's notice. Literally within an hour. Honestly, it's within 10 minutes. Within less than 10 minutes notice, Israel's nuclear weapons have to be set up in a way that they can launch, from the prime minister saying launch, to the general, to telling the generals launch, to the generals conveying down the food chain, not the chain of command but the food chain, launch, to the people launching. And that's even if they don't just have the whole thing bypassed with this. Literally, it can, and with today's technology, they can literally have it so that the prime minister himself has a series of buttons to press, and the missiles will launch, and they have personnel there that will see the alarm, like, all of a sudden they're going about their daily work, maintenance, mopping, sweeping, paperwork, electrical, checking electrical stuff, and all of a sudden you got woo, 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 and they've been trained that gives them a 3 to 5 minute launch warning to clear the area, and doors start to seal, blast doors start to seal, that kind of stuff. That's a possibility too. But whatever the case may be, the difference between the two, the vehicle, on a vehicle, or in a silo, is if they're in a silo, they have static targets. They do not have the capacity to steer the missile once it's gone. That means that they have static targets. Now, considering that there is no evidence that Israel has a fleet of vehicles, ships, air, bombers flying or in movement 24/7 around the world in different positions, goes further to suggest that they have them in silos. Again, emphasizing these are static targets. Now, this is where international inspection, this is the biggest reason Israel is terrified, and they see international inspections as a existential threat to the existence of Israel as a state. The Palestinians are not that threat, but the IAEA, International Atomic Energy, International IAEI, International Atomic Energy Inspections. I think it's IAEI. Okay, like Hans Blitz, I think, was one of the guy famous for doing that in the Iraq war, leading up to the Iraq war, and he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was discredited by the Bush regime, because he was saying there was no nukes, and they were like, we have evidence. I could be wrong about Hans Blitz, but anyways, and his name too. That's the gist of it. So this is why Israel sees that as more of a threat than Palestinian liberation. Because if we're assuming that the inspectors are going to be partially European, from some European countries, Sweden, Switzerland, or Switzerland is probably a terrible example, but Sweden or Norway or France, which is not all that great, but something like along that lines. Even some allies, maybe some Americans, okay, possibly some Asians, like Indonesians. Now, maybe not Indonesians exactly, but some neighbors of Indonesia, or maybe some Japanese. Okay, so within that body of inspectors, these people are going to come and inspect just like they do everywhere else, and be able to determine, this is the scary thought, how many, because think about the Middle East. What is it? Look at the population centers. So if Israel has 150 nukes, how many of those are needed to address the major population centers? Because that's what they'd be targeting, and military facilities that are strewn throughout the Middle East. And you can't, I mean, you could, but you don't technically have to include the Gulf monarchs because they are all allied. Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain, and Qatar. Qatar's kind of on the fence right now because of Jared Kushner. There's some tension right there, but for the most part, the Gulf monarchs are all allies. So we're just say that Israel has less of a nuclear focus on them. But you got Iran, so Turkey. Oh, then we get okay. Actually, that's where it starts getting crazy, anyways. Okay, so you got Iran is a given. Iraq, maybe. Whatever. What do they really have? You got it's not Saudi Arabia. It's not going to be on their radar. Um, Lebanon, which they probably don't want to do because it's so close. Jordan, Egypt. There we go. Egypt, Libya. Not Morocco. You have to understand that the relationship between Israel and Morocco is closer than the relationship with America and Israel. Maybe Ethiopia. I mean, whatever that might be. Yemen. Oh, Yemen, of course. Yemen. So we got that, okay? But then you start getting into the gray area in the very least, and that would be Turkey. How many Israeli nukes are pointed at Turkey? Because Turkey's not a nuclear power. How many are pointed into Asia, like Indonesia, which is the largest Islamic Muslim country population on the planet? I think it's only less than 20% of Muslims are Arabs. Okay, so that's just a Hollywood. And then the African countries are also, they're not really, because people don't really care. If you nuke a bunch of Arabs that are neighbors to black people, let's keep it real. Who gives a shit? But what about North Korea? If Israel is going to nuke North Korea, the South Koreans and the Chinese might be like, hey, now it's the thing too. Then you get into, what about China? Does Israel even perceive China as a threat? Because there is no evidence to suggest that Israel in any way, shape, or form would designate China as a target. And most important thing too is, out of all the nuclear power states that there are, and it's like 9, China is the only one well, there's more than 9. There's 9 that have nuclear weapons, but there's like 27 to, last time I heard it 10 years ago or something like that, it was like 27 countries that operate nuclear energy facilities have within their infrastructure systems that can turn that nuclear energy. That's why they were criticizing Iran, saying that they have a bomb, but they don't have a bomb. They're trying to get a bomb, but they don't have to try to get a bomb. Because Japan is a perfect example. Japan fits into this. Japan is not a nuclear powered state, but America has forced them to adopt nuclear power plants. Japan has systems in play that in the event that they feel an existential threat, like China, let's say China starts to invade, Japan can transform their nuclear energy facilities into nuclear weapon manufacturing facilities and pop out a nuclear arsenal of, some degree or another. Let's just say one thermonuclear multi-warhead weapon in less than a few weeks. So, kind of different. But out of all of that, China is the only one that has already nuclear weapons, but none of their nuclear weapons are active. They're not on a ready stance. They're like housed. They don't have facilities that maintain them on the ready to go. They have to take them out of a warehouse, basically, screw them together. Because you think about a tube, they got to put the top on, the fuselage, the center, which is the guidance, and then pop it into the launch thing, and then go for the launch. As opposed to where America, the UK, India, Pakistan, they have theirs on ready, and most likely Israel have theirs on ready so that they can have them launched within mere minutes. So that's a distinction. So does Israel even see China as a threat? So if they don't, then China might be like, hey, well, you're still targeting North Korea. Okay. And then like Indonesia, you got their neighbors. So then throw in there, are there any, once you get into Turkey, then you're getting into border range European, which I think Turkey is also a member. If it's not a member of the EU, I think it's a member of NATO. And that gets even more complicated, because then you get into the question, well, how many NATO states does Israel have their nukes pointed at? How many NATO states does America have nukes pointed at? Or the UK have their nukes pointed at? Does the UK have any nukes pointed at Germany just in case? And does America have pointed at Germany just in case? Does France have pointed at Germany just in case? And if they do, then you know what? Hey, then my theoretical criticism of Israel potentially having nukes aimed within Europe, and possibly even some that go into the Western Hemisphere. Like, why would any nuclear weapon from Israel be pointed in the Western Hemisphere? So that's the biggest threat to Israel as a state in the world. Okay, so the Palestinians, they're just a diversion. Again, it's always a con. Look over here. Don't look at what the real issue is. We will shock you and awe you so that you perceive this to be our greatest concern by how seriously we take this issue. But meanwhile, we're scared shitless that you guys are going to find out we're ready to kill you at the press of a button. And we're ready to kill multi-millions of you. Masses of you. So, the land of the living, Palestinian resistance and aspirations, plebiscites and direct action. In contrast to the underworld, and that was all to say that I blame the Palestinians for maintaining Islam. That's not even a fucking critical thing. Plebiscites and direct action. In contrast, and I don't mean to convert monotheism, any form of monotheism. Maybe Sikhs is the only variation of monotheism that I'm willing to embrace as not completely antithetical to a healthy human psyche. Because all my focus is a healthy human psyche. That's it. You got a healthy human psyche, it changes everything. You got systems in play or institutions in play that function in ways that injure, inhibit, obstruct, or diminish the capacity of the psyche to manifest its full potential. It's just like having somebody leg tied and then telling them to run a marathon, or having people's hand cuffed behind their back and telling them to screw in a light bulb on the ceiling. That kind of stuff is the way I see it. So anything I see like that, my personal brain sees as unfair. And monotheism is one of those things. So, and the proof of that is, look at the Palestinians. Look at what they're willing to suffer just to maintain, fundamentally, the very Jewish narrative that they claim is the source of all of their woes. But it's not true. They are. Plebiscite and direct action. In contrast to the underworld of institutional democracy, the land of the living represents the vibrant, often chaotic energy of Palestinian resistance and aspirations for self-determination. This includes grassroots movements like the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, BDS campaign, protests and uprisings such as the first and second intifadas, efforts to gain international recognition and support for Palestinian statehood. The Furies as agents of justice. The Furies in this context could symbolize the relentless pursuit of justice by Palestinians and their allies. They represent the moral outrage and demand for accountability that drives resistance movements even in the face of overwhelming power imbalances. 5. The Eumenides, co-optation and compromise. Transformation or neutralization. As we discussed earlier, the Eumenides represent the potential for grassroots movements to be co-opted, that's the word I've ever seen, or neutralized by the system. In the Israeli-Palestinian context, this could include the Oslo Accord, which promised peace but failed to deliver meaningful change for Palestinians. The normalization agreements between Israel and some Arab states, which sidelined the Palestinian cause. Oh, that's perfect. That's all the Gulf monarchs. That's an easy way to blanket that over. Gulf monarchs align with Jewish democracy. The internal divisions within Palestinian leadership, which have sometimes undermined the broader struggle for justice. Okay, we saw that in South Africa, best exemplified in Nelson Mandela and his wife. Okay, Millie Mandela, the mother of South Africa. The danger, and she went through the labor. It's kind of sound fucked up, but Nelson Mandela, in the birthing process of South Africa, did what a man does in the birthing process, and just, in prison or not, tortured or not, he sat on the sidelines while Millie shed blood in labor pains, giving birth to the nation. If it wasn't for her, they would have never resorted to letting Nelson Mandela out as an alternative for self-preservation, not for stability or anything like that. The Afrikaners are still there. Look at Elon Musk, and they're spreading now. And they're bringing their contaminated, deviant, disgusting ideological principles with them, and then using the economic powers that they're able to acquire in foreign countries to make their grandparents' vision of the world look like it's more sensible than people give it credit for. The danger of lost potential. Like the Furies transformed into the Eumenides, these developments risk diluting the radical energy of the Palestinian resistance and reinforcing the status quo. Broader symbolic themes. The dual nature of democracy. Israel's democracy, like Hades' realm, is both a system of order and a site of exclusion. This duality raises important questions about the nature of democracy itself. Can a state be truly democratic if it denies equal rights to a significant portion of the population under its control? 2, which is a no-brainer. That's why we have the word apartheid. But anyways, but it's interesting too. I'm not gonna get into it because I've already talked for 40 minutes and I realized it went that long. But it's interesting that every apartheid state that I've been aware of relies on democracy as its fundamental means of sustaining it. Very interesting. The role of myth and narrative. Both Israelis and Palestinians use powerful narratives to justify their claims for action. For Israelis, this often involves the idea of a Jewish democratic state. For Palestinians, it centers on resistance, self-determination, and historical justice. These narratives, like myths, shape perceptions, and realities on the ground. 3, the struggle for balance. The tension between the underworld, institutional democracy, and the land of the living, grassroots resistance, reflects the broader struggle for balance in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How can justice be achieved without perpetuating cycles of violence and exclusion? Conclusion. By applying this mythological framework to the state of Israel's democratic system, we can better understand the complexities and contradictions at play. The underworld of institutional democracy, guarded by Cerberus, and separated by the river Styx, exist in tension with the land of the living, Palestinian resistance, and aspirations for justice. The furies and humidities remind us of the dangers of co-optation and the importance of staying true to the radical ideals of justice and equality. Oh, that's funny. This approach allows us to explore the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a way that is both deeply symbolic and grounded in historical and political realities. If you'd like, we can delve further into specific aspects of this framework and explore how other mythological figures might illuminate different dimensions of the conflict. Thank you for engaging in thoughtful discussion. And let's just do this. I mean, I've talked your ear off so much anyways. Who cares? It's funny because they don't have a talk option, so I got to come over here. Can you translate this into English? Please. Okay, here's a natural sounding English translation of the Chinese sentence. Thank you for your trust and respect. Let's continue our discussion together. Or for a more formal tone, I appreciate your trust and respect. We can continue exploring this further. Can you give me the Chinese pronunciation for this as well? So I did it like that because I could do this.
当然，我可以为你提供这个句子的中文拼音。谢谢你的信任和尊重。我们一起继续探讨吧。
拼音，谢谢你的信任和尊重。我们一起继续讨论吧。
逐字拼音及声调。谢谢，心 sh j 一声一声，你 ni 三声，爹的 j 二声，信任心任四声四声，和 he 二声，尊重尊重一声四声，句号我们 woman 三声二声，一起一期一声三声，继续继续四声四声，探讨讨论三声四声，爸爸一声声调。汉语中的声调非常重要，不同的声调会改变词的意思。语调，在实际说话中，语调会根据上下文和表达的感情而有所变化。如果你想练习发音，可以尝试用在线的汉语发音字典或 APP 来辅助学习。想听听标准的中文发音吗？许多在线翻译工具或语言学习 APP 都提供语音功能，你可以输入这句话，然后听听标准的发音。温馨提示：多听多练，听大量的中文音频，多模仿标准的发音。找一个语言伙伴，和一个说中文的人练习口语，可以更快地提高发音。不要害怕出错，犯错是学习语言的正常过程，重要的是要敢于开口说。希望这些信息能帮助你更好地学习中文。